The Circular Momentum Show, the premier podcast and information source for leaders in the IT asset disposition and IT reseller community. With a focus on growth strategies, IT lifecycle services, and making sustainability profitable and beneficial to the environment.
Welcome to the Circular Momentum Show. I'm Pete Paisley, and today we're rejoined by Laura Graydon, Senior Director of Market Intelligence at IDC, to look at growth in the data center markets for ITADs. We're diving into some extraordinary market dynamics. IDC forecasts the global ITAD Services market will surge from $10 billion this year to $15 to $20 billion by 2029, and that's just for the services piece. Even more impressive, the used and refurbished data center asset market is set to nearly double, from just under $10 billion now to almost $20 billion in that same time window of a few years. What's driving this explosive growth? I think you probably know. The AI infrastructure wave is creating a perfect storm. NVIDIA's data center revenue hit $41 billion in Q2, up 56% year over year, and they're now shipping Blackwell platforms globally. This raises a critical question for ITAD providers. Will previous generation GPUs like the A100, H100, and H200 get swapped out for newer Blackwell units at an accelerated price? Could we be looking at a massive wave of high-value GPU remarketing opportunities? I'm sure we all hope so. So let's find out. Laura Graydon, welcome to the show. Joining me is Laura Graydon, Senior Director of Market Intelligence for IT Infrastructure, Software, and Solutions at IDC. Laura, welcome back to the Circular Integrity Show.
Thanks for having me, Pete. Excited to dig into these numbers with you.
We've got some fascinating data today. IDC is forecasting the global ITAD services market for data centers will hit around $8 billion this year, growing to around $12 billion by 2029. And the used and refurbished data center asset market, it grows from just under $9 billion to almost $15 billion in that same time frame. Those are spectacular growth numbers.
Yes, the ITAD and refurbished markets are quite healthy, and they're going to continue to be. And what's driving this? It's not just the normal refresh cycles anymore at this time. It's really the fundamental transformation in how data centers are being built and operated.
All right, Laura, we're going to start with the elephant in the room, or should I say the GPU in the data center. AI infrastructure is clearly the dominant force here. Walk us through what you're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. AI infrastructure investments are spreading across all regions globally. At IDC, we're seeing robust GPU server investments led by hyperscalers, by cloud service providers, including some who are focused only on AI services, primarily in the US and China currently. But here's what's interesting. Regional dynamics are shifting due to export controls and also supply-side power considerations. So we're seeing intensified growth in Southeast Asia and India as a result.
So it's not just about who has the technology, it's about who has the power infrastructure to support it.
Yeah, exactly. Because these AI workloads are incredibly power hungry. One GPU server rack can use 10 to 20 times more power than traditional servers. And this is forcing C-suite leaders to think differently about where they deploy that infrastructure.
Yeah, I see. So let's talk about these vendors. Dell, HPE, Supermicro, Lenovo, they're all posting impressive AI server revenue growth. Dell's at $8.2 billion in AI server shipments with an $11.7 billion backlog. But here's what caught my attention. All four OEMs are facing margin challenges despite this growth. What's going on there?
Yeah, great question. The margin pressures really come from two sides. First, you have the scale and bargaining power of cloud service providers. When you're selling to AWS, Azure, Microsoft Azure, right, or Google Cloud, they're buying at massive volume and they have tremendous negotiating leverage. They can essentially dictate the terms. And then second, there's fierce competition among the OEMs themselves, right? To win market share in this explosive growth market, they're providing very competitive pricing, sometimes at the expense of their margins. It's really a land grab mentality right now.
Yeah, so they're sacrificing short-term profitability for their long-term market position.
Precisely. And it's not just about the hardware sale. These relationships with hyperscalers can lead to ongoing service contracts and next generation deployments and overall the strategic partnerships. But it does put pressure on their bottom line in the near term.
Yeah, I see NVIDIA reported Q2 data center revenue of 41.1 billion, and that's up 56% year over year. They're shipping their new Blackwell platform globally. Here's a question that's relevant to our ITAD audience. Will previous generation GPUs like the A100, H100, and H200 get swapped out for Blackwell units at an accelerated rate? Could this drive a wave of aftermarket activity?
Yes, the rate of swapping out of GPUs is really a key question for the ITAD industry. And the signals aren't clear yet. But I'd say accelerated rates are certainly a strong possibility. Here's what we do know. The performance gains with Blackwell are significant enough that for certain AI training workloads, especially, meaning those most demanding types of AI workloads, the economics will favor upgrading. However, not every workload requires those cutting edge GPUs, so we're likely to see a cascading effect. The top tier AI training will move to Blackwell, while H100s and H200s will get redeployed for things like inference workloads or other less demanding training tasks.
I see. So these GPUs might not hit the recycling stream. First, they'll find second and third lives in different use cases.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where ITAD providers need to position themselves. They're not just the end of life processors, but really as lifecycle management partners who can help organizations cascade and redeploy those valuable assets to the appropriate secondary uses.
Let's zoom out and look at broader market trends. You mentioned something interesting in the report. The enterprise refresh wave from last year has slowed down. What does that mean?
Broad enterprise tech refresh cycle in the data center, especially for the traditional x86 servers, has slowed down in most markets. So what we saw in 2023 and early 2024 was organizations upgrading aging infrastructure. Some of that was due to delays from the pandemic years, but that wave itself has crested.
So the demand is shifting then.
Yes, right, toward more targeted upgrades and the new AI infrastructure. So instead of wholesale data center refreshes, what we're seeing is strategic investments in the specific capabilities like GPU clusters, the high performance storage for AI workloads, and the new networking infrastructure to support these new architectures.
Yeah, the report also mentions ARM architecture and NVL72 deployments accelerating, with GB200 based servers now shipping in volume. For our listeners who might not be familiar, what's the significance of this shift?
There is a fundamental architectural change going on. ARM processors, traditionally used in mobile devices, are now proving highly efficient for certain data center workloads, and particularly so when paired with GPUs. So, for example, the GB200 combines the ARM-based Grace CPUs with the Blackwell GPUs in a unified architecture, and it's incredibly power efficient and designed for AI workloads. For ITAD providers, this means diversifying expertise beyond the traditional x86 Intel and AMD systems. It means adding capabilities to test, grade, and ultimately remarket the ARM-based infrastructure.
Yeah, and I imagine the testing requirements are probably quite different.
Yeah, absolutely. There's different instruction sets, different software stacks, and different thermal profiles. So it's not just plug and play knowledge transfer from the x86 experience when it comes to ARM architectures.
One more trend I wanted to touch on before we move to the next segment: cost controls and sustainability. The report notes these have moved from planning into action. What are you seeing?
Yeah, there's clear momentum around liquid cooling, renewable energy integration, and overall modular infrastructure. What's happening is organizations are realizing that energy efficiency isn't just good for the planet, it's essential for the bottom line. When you're running AI workloads that can consume on the order of megawatts of power, every percentage point of efficiency improvement translates to significant cost savings and real ROI.
Yeah, and this has major implications for ITAD, which we'll dive into in the next segment.
Here's what we often hear: we don't need ISO or other certifications right now, or our clients aren't asking for it. Just because it's not needed today doesn't mean it won't be required tomorrow. Certifications usually take 7 to 16 weeks to complete. That's 2 to 4 months. If a client suddenly requires it, waiting isn't an option. These certifications help you qualify faster for global and OEM contracts. Keeps your operations audit ready all year. Cuts internal waste and rework. Builds trust with buyers before price is even discussed. For example, a U.S. plastics and machinery manufacturer invested $8,000 in ISO 9001 plus ISO 14001. The next quarter, they qualified for 2 OEM contracts worth $240,000. Another firm in the same space skipped certification and couldn't even bid. ISO isn't an expense, it's proof you're ready when opportunity knocks. Don't wait for a client to demand it be the one already certified. Book your free consultation today with MG Environmental Consulting.
Laura, more about what this means for ITAD providers. IDC has identified several operational and strategic shifts needed. And one of the first up is component harvesting. What's driving this?
As these high value GPU servers come off lease or get upgraded, there's tremendous value in the components themselves, particularly the GPUs, right? A single H100 GPU can be worth $25,000 to $30,000 on the secondary market, plus or minus, right? ITAD providers need capabilities for testing and remarketing these components in order to maximize value recovery for their customers.
Yeah, so it's not just about wiping drives and reselling whole units anymore.
Right, exactly. And resale requires sophisticated testing capabilities to validate the GPU functionality, the memory integrity, and the performance benchmarks. Buyers in the secondary market want assurance that these components will perform as expected.
And the second major implication is around something you mentioned earlier, liquid cooling. The report asks a critical question. If a server was retired from an environment using direct liquid cooling, full immersion, or other advanced cooling methods, will ITAD providers need to replicate those environments to properly test the gear?
Yes, and that's already happening. You can't properly stress test a liquid cooled server in an air cooled environment. The thermal profiles are completely different. Leading ITAD providers are investing in the liquid cooling test beds, both direct to chip and immersion systems, in order to properly validate equipment before remarketing it.
Yeah, that's probably a significant capital investment for the ITAD.
It is a significant capital investment, but it's necessary to serve this market. And it's not just about testing, it's also about understanding the entire life cycle of liquid cooled infrastructure. How do you safely decommission it? How do you handle the coolant? What are the environmental considerations? This all requires specific and new expertise and processes.
Yeah, the third strategic shift is becoming an asset lifecycle management partner. This goes beyond traditional ITAD services. Talk about the role of telemetry data here.
Yeah. Telemetry data is absolutely critical to asset lifecycle management. Modern servers generate extensive telemetry, power consumption, thermal data, error rates, and utilization metrics. This data is important for analyzing and predicting performance. It enables that proactive approach to lifecycle management as opposed to reactive or forklift-style upgrades.
So the telemetry on these systems have predictive health components, which provide data to predict when it's optimal to refresh or redeploy.
Exactly. Using telemetry data helps inform when an asset or group of assets is a prime candidate for refresh, decommissioning, cascading, or reselling. It's really about predictive lifecycle management.
Yeah, now here's a question about that might surprise some of us in the industry. Is telemetry data subject to data sanitization requirements? Does it contain identifying information like IP addresses and server names?
Yes, absolutely. When it comes to data sanitization, many, yes, absolutely. When it comes to data sanitization, many organizations focus just on customer data on hard drive. Yes, absolutely. When it comes to data sanitization, many organizations focus just on customer data and hard drives. But the telemetry data that resides in the management controller must also be sanitized because it frequently contains sensitive information that qualifies as personally identifiable information under laws like GDPR and HIPAA. These are things like IP addresses, host names, server names, and they can give attackers a roadmap of internal architectures, things like user IDs, also fragments of user queries, and network topologies. Standards like NIST 888 specify that the clear and purge actions must also apply to all user addressable storage locations, which includes telemetry logs. So that's why you want to look for those types of standards.
Yeah, so it's about sanitizing every component that stores data.
Correct. And there's a flip side. That same telemetry data is incredibly valuable for grading assets for the secondary market. It's like a Carfax report for a used car. The telemetry data helps tell a buyer the true condition of the hardware.
And what are some of the specific metrics that might be most valuable in that regard?
Yeah, it's things like power on hours, thermal logs, the smart data for SSDs and HDDs, and also the error correction logs. So for example, right, power on hours help determine the remaining useful life of components like fans and power supplies. Another example, thermal logs, they help identify if the asset was consistently overheated, which may indicate degraded silicon or CPU stress.
Yeah, so there's a balance. You need to figure out how to sanitize sensitive information while preserving the operational history. We really appreciate Lara joining us from IDC and breaking down these market dynamics today. What we've uncovered is remarkable. The ITAD industry isn't just growing, it's really transforming. The numbers tell a compelling story. ITAD Services scaling to 15 to 20 billion by 2029, and the remarketing revenue piece of the business for used data center assets nearly doubling to 20 billion. But here's what makes us different from traditional refresh cycles. We're seeing a cascading effect driven by these AI infrastructure investments. So as the organizations upgrade to Blackwell GPUs for cutting-edge AI training, those older H100s and H200s, they're not heading to recycling bins or maybe even off-site to you. They're finding second and third lives in inference workloads and less demanding applications. This creates unprecedented opportunities for ITAD providers who can position themselves not just as end-of-life processors, but as strategic lifecycle management partners who can do the services to move these assets from point A to point B. The message is clear. The market is moving fast, and the window to build the capabilities we discussed today, component harvesting, liquid-cooled test environments, telemetry-based asset grading, that window is now. Join us in a week for part 2 on this topic, where we'll break down the specific services driving this growth and explore why GPU-enabled server remarketing is outpacing every other ITAD segment. I'm Pete Paisley. Thanks for watching the Circular Momentum Show.
You've been listening to the Circular Momentum Show. Thanks for joining us. Don't miss our next episode coming soon, where we feature market leaders in the IT asset disposition and reseller community. Thanks to our sponsors, MG Environmental. And special thanks to our guests and growth strategy consultants, Circular Momentum. The Circular Momentum Show is produced and written by